Okay, so Professor Beeman achieved his bachelor's degree in biology with an emphasis, and help my wording because I'm an accountant, psychobiology. I knew biology was a little psycho, but now it's actually physically there. Yes, yes. From the University of California, Irvine, and a master's of biology with an emphasis in neurobiology. I thought they were the same. Are they the same?
Close.
Close, okay. Like cousins from Cal State LA. He has been married for 29 years. Pretty good nowadays, right? Yay! And to look at him, he has 3 grown children. 3 of them. I have 4, and I look like I have 4. I mean, really. He has a really educated family. His wife, wow, practicing dentist. Eldest son finished his master's degree from Cal Poly Pomona. Second son has a bachelor's in engineering as a captain and a pilot in the Air Force. Whoa, yes, thank you for your service. And his athletic daughter is at Hendrix College in Arkansas and is captain of the NCAA volleyball team.
Whoa.
Yeah, pretty good, huh? Yeah. Joseph is in his 26th year of teaching. This is a college where you get very comfortable, don't you? Yeah, you get. It is. That's why we get comfortable here. And has taught non-major biology, major biology, and human, I have to spell this, anatomy, human anatomy, like this guy up here. He is currently teaching human biology and human physiology. He designed the herpetarium, you know, the lizards and stuff, in the San Gabriel building. I am so glad it's in San Gabriel and not in San Rafael. And is in charge of the care of the variety of reptiles. He comes all the time to make sure those things are fed so they won't get out to eat us. He has recently developed a new biology course called the Human Form and Function that will be part of the Health Information Technology Certification Program. He is also one of the key players with making our campus non-smoking. For this, I really appreciate it. In 2008, Joseph received the Professor Teacher of the Year by the Associated Students of Glendale College. So not only does his faculty like him, but also the students like him. Okay, his talk today is Blissful Eating, Compulsive Thinking, the Brain-Body Connection. See up there? I know we will learn a lot about eating the correct foods. I don't know about you, but I certainly need to listen to this. Okay? So, Joe, here you go.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Well, thanks, everyone, and thank you for coming today. And I'm going to quick reintroduce. My wife is here, actually, today, so I want to reintroduce my wife, Dr. Sylvia Beeman. Yeah, thank you. And I see a lot of you that I know, which is awesome. And so we're going to talk today about this topic here. But I want to mention something first before I kind of get rolling. The stuff I'm going to talk about here is frontier stuff. It's the wild, wild west of physiology. So the information that I'm going to give you today, some of it we know, real solid. Most of it is needs more research. Most of it needs a lot of stuff, coming up. But it's exciting, and it's big. It's perhaps very big at some point. So that's why I want to talk about it. Not because I'm going to give you all the answers today. I'm not going to. But I'm going to throw some thoughts in your head and that we're thinking of as physiologists and put them out there where you can really look at it and analyze things in a different way than you've probably seen, so far. So cutting edge research, latest stuff. Let's take a look at it. All right. The theme that I'm kind of wrapping everything around today is going to be obesity. We know that we've had trouble coming up with a solution for this problem. We haven't stopped it. The latest statistics from the CDC are 2010, but I'm positive that if you went all the way to 2015 and beyond, it would still be a problem. And the problem is getting worse and worse and worse, and it's not getting better. So we need to take a look and say, hey, how come people keep gaining weight, especially in the South? And what can we do to reverse this trend? What can we do to stop this trend? So we look at the problems that come with gaining weight. Body mass index is what we usually use, your height versus your weight ratios. If somebody's at a body mass index of 30 or greater, they're considered obese. A body mass index getting into the 27, 28, 29 range is getting dangerous. Look at all the different degenerative diseases that could occur. The ones that really pop out to me right now are heart disease and diabetes. Are both of those, heart disease, #1 killer in the United States of America. Diabetes, epidemic proportions. Look at the increase in the amount as you gain weight. So it's a guarantee that you're going to get diabetes as you put on weight. All right. So all the researchers out there for many, many years have been looking at pretty much 2 different ways to research this and try to come up with a way to reverse the trend. The first one on top is to say that we have an energy imbalance. We take in too much food. This is true. We do. We take in a lot of highly concentrated food. We don't exercise enough, and therefore we gain weight. This is a valid study. A lot of studies can be done on this. This is a good factor to look at. I'm not going to say don't look at this, but it's out there. The second one on the bottom says hormone imbalance. So could there be some type of hormone imbalance in someone's body that causes them to gain too much weight? In this case, they're showing you're taking in a lot of carbohydrates. It causes the production of a lot of insulin. You guys have heard of insulin before. And the insulin will cause you to store a lot of these excess carbohydrates in the form of fat in your fat cells. So you tend to gain weight. Another very valid point, another one that needs studies done. So both of these have had the most studies done on them. My job today is to introduce to you 2 other factors that might be causing us to gain weight and not allowing us to turn this around. So I'm not going to talk about energy imbalance. I'm not going to talk about hormone imbalance. Lots of studies have been done on those. I'm going to go out onto the frontier, the wild, wild west area, and we're going to look at some new explanations for the possibility that we're gaining weight. Now let's just take the hormones for a second. Lots of different hormones affect weight gain. Let me just take some of the more common ones. Okay? We know that ghrelin comes from your stomach. It's a chemical, a hormone that causes us to feel hungry. So we know we're going to secrete ghrelin when we're hungry. We know that insulin and peptide YY and leptin, all coming from different places. Insulin from your pancreas, peptide YY from your small intestines, and leptin from your fat cells, that they're all going to suppress your appetite. But the key to this is not what all these hormones are doing so much. There's lots of hormones out there that affect appetite. The key is this: all those hormones go right here. This is where I want to concentrate about half of my talk, in the brain. Because the brain is where those hormones go to control appetite. So we need to talk about how is the brain dealing with appetite? How is the brain dealing with eating, with food intake, and with satiety? That word means to stop. You push your way away from the table and say, I don't want to eat anymore. We need to look at that. And that's going to be here in the brain. The other area that I'm going to focus on is often called in biology the other brain, and that'll be the gut. So I'm going to look at both brains, okay? The brain that you're familiar with, and then the other brain, okay, today. And we'll look at how they deal with food. All right. What drives us to eat? For many years, we've known about the homeostatic system, the metabolic system. The metabolic system says, hey, when you're hungry, you seek out food, you eat it. When you're satiated, when you're full, you push your way away from the table, you're done. The center for that, the command center for hunger and satiety, is the hypothalamus. If all you had was the hypothalamus dealing with food, no one would be obese, because you would eat when you're hungry, and as soon as you got full, you would stop, and nothing else would happen. That would be it. Okay? Hunger and satiety, metabolism, the metabolic center. But many people eat in complete absence of hunger. They finish their meal, they push themselves away from the table, they go, man, I can't eat another bite, and then the dessert plate comes by. Oh my God, I think I've got room. Okay? Many people eat in spite of ample fat reserves. Why are they still eating? There is another place in the brain that I want to talk about today. And the place in the brain that I want to talk about is the hedonic center, the non-homeostatic system that helps to control appetite also. The command center for this particular system is in the nucleus accumbens. I'll show you where that is. It's in an area called the ventral striatum, for those of you who are familiar with the brain. And the hedonic hot spot, or where it reacts, this is the nucleus accumbens. It responds to pleasure. It responds to reward, which is associated with food, isn't it? So let's look at it. This is the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is well protected in the center of your brain. It's the metabolic control. Hunger, satiety. Does a great job at that. Down here in the lower right corner, we've got the hypothalamus. But up here in the upper right corner, we have this hedonic system. This system that works off of reward. And this system is interesting. Evolutionarily, it's very conserved. We see that it's in the center of the brain, a deepest part of the brain. In lower mammals, we call it the center that controls the sense of smell. So they call it the entorhinal cortex. But this area is interesting because you start looking at the different areas that are within it, and I don't expect you all to understand these, but this deals with reward. This deals with this desire for food. And it's got an area of your cortex, and your cortex is a large 80% of your brain there. It has a gyrus right there. And then it has some areas that are called the striatum area, because when you look at them in certain cuts, they look like a striped appearance. And so they include the caudate nucleus and the putamen and the ventral tegmental area in the midbrain. But this pathway right here, this red one, where you see the nucleus accumbens, that's the area, that's the hedonic hotspot. That's the area that replies or responds to pleasure and reward. And all these other areas play a role. And then, over here on the far left side at the top, right behind your forehead, and on the sides here, you have some areas that are very, very important for cognitive control. This is the area that says, no, I'm finished, I'm not going to eat that dessert, and I'm going to push myself away. So you've got three areas working here. Let's simplify the picture. Okay? And let's look at it and say, for food intake, no matter what the hormones are doing, this is where everything goes. So you have the homeostatic regulation, hunger, satiety, the hypothalamus, metabolic. You have the reward center. That's a big one. Ventral tegmental area in the midbrain, going to the nucleus accumbens, and a number of other surrounding areas. Hedonic hunger, pleasure, reward. And then the top-down control. This is this part of the brain right behind your forehead on the sides that says, I have executive function. I have salience. I know how to put things in order. I know how to order my life, and I'm not going to get out of control here. Does this make sense so far, right? Okay. Now, food choices. The nutritional value of food, that's the job of the homeostatic system. The homeostatic system says, I'm hungry, I'm going for food. Hunger, satiety. But the taste, the flavor, the sensory satisfaction of food, that's the hedonic system. Totally different system. Non-homeostatic. A drive to seek pleasure. The human brain is hardwired for this. You are born with the hedonic system completely adult formed. It doesn't need to grow any bigger. It's already there. Now, that frontal area that controls everything, that cognitive area, that doesn't fully develop until you're about 20 to 25 years old. But the hedonic center is already there. Why is it there? Because you need this for survival. The hedonic system guides us to eat. Think of the ancestors. Was food readily available for them? Not at all. And to go out and seek food meant that you could become food. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you're like, hey, I better have a strong drive to seek this food. So if you didn't have that hedonic center in your brain, then you just had the hunger and the satiety. Are you ever going to get hungry enough to get out of that cave and find something? Do you see what I'm saying? So you need something in the brain to drive you towards that food. And this is a driven area of the brain. It says, hey, let's seek it out. We need this. More than just hunger. Okay? Also, driving you to procreate, to continue the species. Makes sense. Same area of the brain. Contemporary world, Oh my goodness, something's different here. Chocolate, romantic flirtation, enjoyable music, drugs, all affect the same part of the brain, the hedonic center. They all go to the same part. Now, let's break it down. We had these pictures that you saw. So you see the cognitive control on top, you see the hedonic center in the middle, and then you see the hypothalamus down below, correct? All right. I look and I say, oh, here's food on the left, and it affects all three. Here's drugs on the right, and it affects all three, especially the hedonic center. And the more drugs the person takes, especially strong drugs like cocaine, heroin, the greater the chance that the hedonic center will just take over the other two centers and start controlling. So, looking through all the literature, digging through all the literature, all these scientific studies, when did they first start using the words food addiction? Could somebody possibly be addicted to food? Oh, no way. We eat it every couple hours. It's impossible. And for many, many years, scientists stayed away from that. Didn't even touch it. Oh, drug addiction? Yeah, 1940s, 1950s, boom, boom, boom. Food addiction, 2006. Everything I'm going to show you today is no more than 9 to 10 years old, 2006 and beyond. So, and most of it is 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15. Wow. Latest stuff. So we're looking and we're saying, could somebody be addicted to food? Could this hedonic center be doing something? So this particular chart I took from the United States Department of Agriculture, and what they did was they did a simple study. They wanted to find out, what kinds of foods could possibly be addictive. And so they did this study and they kind of came up with some numbers. They took it from 1970 to 1997, so about a 30-year period of time. And they said, all right, let's look at just unrefined foods, animal proteins, excluding eggs. And in that 30-year period of time, we've had a 7% increase. That kind of equals population growth, pretty much. That's not a big increase. Same thing with beans, not much of an increase. Then you look at corn and wheat flour, a 42% increase. Okay, look at this, 26% increase for caloric sweeteners. Look at high fructose corn syrup. 1,240% increase. Carbonated soft drinks, 218% increase in consumption, 207% increase in frozen potatoes, ready-to-eat cereals, 66% increase. Just pick out some of them, and you start to see some trends, this kind of trend. It turns out that processed foods that chemists and biologists, unfortunately, and other different scientists have been working on. And what they're doing is they're altering this food. Food like this. And right now you're going, man, my hedonic center is pretty good right now because it's 1240, Mr. Beeman. All right, so we'll get this done. All right, and so you look at it and you go, hey, there's something about that. And of course, we go back to the part of the brain that I was talking about, and let's get a little more specific. We look at this part of the brain and we see, oh, here's the yellow part. This is the hedonic center. This is from the ventral tegmental area. There's the nucleus accumbens. Here's that top-down control. Remember we were talking about that? Frontal cortex. And here's the caudate nucleus, the putamen, the striatum area. What do they use? Mostly dopamine. Dopamine's a chemical in your brain. And what does dopamine do? Look at its functions. Reward, pleasure, euphoria, motor function. Why motor function? Because after you get the reward, the pleasure, then you go, now I'm going to seek it out. I'm going to get out of the cave. I'm going to find it. No matter what the danger is. I need food, man, and I need it now. Do you get the idea? So it's all tied together. Compulsion, perseverance until you find it, right? Preservation, making yourself alive. Okay, now, in the brain, for those of you who don't have a real background in the brain, in the brain, the way that neurons, the cells of the brain, communicate with each other, and you've got hundreds of billions of neurons. And then all the little connections between them aren't actual real connections, like two wires connecting to each other. They come really close to each other, and then they secrete chemicals, and the chemicals affect the target cell. And these little things, they're called synapses. You have more of these little connections in one person's brain than there are stars in the whole universe. One person's brain. Wow. You look at yourself in the mirror and immediately I'm impressed, right? It's just your brain alone. So you look and you say, all right, so now I look and I say, okay, in a normal eating pattern, you'll release dopamine. That's the chemical that's used in the hedonic center for the most part. And dopamine will bind to its receptors on target cells, and you got a certain number of receptors and dopamine, and they talk to each other that way, like us talking to each other. They talk to each other with chemicals. But in addiction, let's just take drug addiction for a second because you're more familiar with that. In drug addiction, like this one over here, I mean, not that you've used drugs. All right. God, I got to be careful about what I'm saying. So anyways, so I look and I say, okay, dopamine released, and then see all the receptors? Look how much dopamine is being released if someone takes cocaine. So what happens when you take cocaine, Mr. Beeman? All right, I'll tell you. What happens is you release a whole bunch of this dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine, 3 different big chemicals in the brain. And the way to take them back out of that little space between your cell and the target is blocked by the cocaine. So now you're stimulating these receptors, ultra stimulus. And you go, whoa, what a great high. Does that make sense? Because you feel it in your hedonic center. And that hedonic center is reward, pleasure, right? And that's what's happening. You're hitting these receptors and stimulate them. So, dopamine and food, is there a relationship there? Since that's our theme today, we're looking at food, right? Dopamine coordinates many of the aspects of food reward. Dopamine deals with arousal, increased attention. So, you ever had this happen where you're kind of hungry, but you could go for a couple hours, and then somebody brings in a plate of food that you like. And you're talking to somebody, and you're like, and you can't even talk to them anymore. You like your conversation, you're not listening to what they're saying. Do you understand what I'm doing? Dopamine. That's dopamine. Psychomotor activation, conditioned learning, meaning that you remember food-associated stimuli. So if you ever see those food-associated stimuli again, you're like, oh yeah, I want that. Okay? Also, used by our ancestors. Makes a lot of sense. Our ancestors needed this. For the many times that palatable food was scarce, it was motivation. It was a drive. Go out there and get it, even though it's scarce. Find it. Eat it so you can procreate, continue the species. Okay? Now, though, is palatable food everywhere. It's all over the place in the United States. Our hedonic system just can't resist. Battles are occurring in some people every single day between the rational metabolic part of your brain saying, no, we're satiated, let's push ourselves away, and then the hedonic center that says, oh man, I got to have more. That stuff's just really good. All right. So we created an artificial obesogenic environment in the United States of America. Highly palatable, poor quality food, readily available, and super heavily advertised. Anybody disagree with that one? No. Supercharging our reward system. The hedonic system overrides the homeostatic system, says I'm in control. The hedonic system undermines our normal satiety signals and stimulates a drive to eat even when there's no physiological need for food. Wow. Overpowering the stop signals. In some cases, the more that's eaten, the more you want. Happens to me when I eat potato chips. Does it happen to you when you eat potato? Happens to me every time. If I eat potato chips, I can't stop. I have to eat at least half the bag before I finally stop. So I don't even keep them in the house. Isn't that crazy? All right. So now, excessive hedonic drive initiators. What are they? Are they hunger? No. Attempts to feel better. Are they hunger? No. Relieve stress. Are they hunger? No. Escape. You ever done that? I see this all the time. Come home. Where's that box of chocolate? I just need it, man. I just need it. Today's just one of those days where I need it. Gotta have it. Seeking comfort. These are the reasons why people eat beyond satiety. Has nothing to do with hunger. Both animal and human studies have shown support for theories that both drug use, drug addiction, and highly palatable food, that means food that has purposely had added fat, added sugar put into it on purpose, converges on shared pathways in what we call the mesolimbic system. That's the hedonic system that I've just been talking about. All right, now let's go further. In physiology, it is a very common thing to talk about bow ties. It looks like a bow tie, doesn't it? Okay. A bow tie to a physiologist is not a fancy event. It's the fact that no matter what the intake is in your brain, no matter what you're feeding in from all your different sensations, those signals end up being funneled, like our Los Angeles freeways, to one kind of common pathway, and then they sort of branch out to where they need to go. So it doesn't matter if it's sex, it's food, work, family, nature, whatever it is, all those signals end up going into the hedonic system and then back out to where they need to go. And food intake, same thing, into the hypothalamus, the metabolic system, and then back out to control your organs and tissues. This is the bow tie effect. Everything kind of gets funneled in through certain common pathways. All right, so let's think of food and addiction. Unilever is the parent company of Breyer's Ice Cream and Ben & Jerry's. Okay, both very good ice creams. They were the first to do some studies on this using functional MRIs. The neat thing about functional MRIs and PET scans, those two kind of inventions, is that they've opened up a whole world of the brain for us. Functional MRIs can look at the amount of oxygen use in the brain, kind of tracks hemoglobin for those who understand hemoglobin. But you can track the amount of oxygen use. Would you think that the amount of oxygen use as it goes up, that's a part of the brain that's active, right? Using oxygen. PET scans, which I'll show you in a minute, they track usually the amount of glucose being used by the cells. Again, you would use more glucose because you have more energy in that cell, so it makes sense. That cell is going to be active. It can also, PET scans are even more accurate. They can track the exact receptors for dopamine. How many are there? Because you just have to label them properly. I can talk about that another time. I don't have time today. But it's interesting, and you can track the actual receptors. Interesting stuff. So, put graduate students into a functional MRI machine. Scan their brain while they're eating ice cream. All right. Yeah, this is a good study to be a graduate student. All right. So I like that. Now, the brain pleasure pathways go crazy. They light up because functional MRIs can track you while you're doing an activity. They don't have to wait till later. So they light up, boom, boom, boom. So this is the hedonic center lighting up. So they come out and they say, all right, our advertisers, it's official, man. Ice cream makes you happy. Now, this is a long time ago that this happened. Has that same theme stuck with the processed food industry. Let me give you an example. Coca-Cola. Psh, open happiness. You ever heard that? No, not psh, it's going to quench your thirst. Right? It's open happiness. The hedonic center. Okay? PET scans. You take someone who's addicted to cocaine and you show them an image of somebody snorting cocaine, or you take an obese person and you show them a picture when they're hungry of a delicious hamburger. And you got them both hooked up to a PET scan. The results are the same. A surge of dopamine in the same part of the brain, and guess what part of the brain that is? The hedonic center. Yeah. Same part of the brain. All right. Food addiction is not as strong as addiction to cocaine or heroin, so it's gone under the wire for many, many years. And now it's starting to pop up in a lot of studies, especially since 2006. Similar neurocircuitry, similar overlap. So I'm looking through the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. This is the Bible of psychiatry. This is where psychiatrists go to find all their information. All right. And I'm looking through this thing, I find this paragraph. Check this paragraph out. I want to read it for you. Some individuals with disorders described in this chapter report eating-related symptoms resembling those typically endorsed by individuals with substance use disorders, like addicted to drugs, okay? Such as strong craving and patterns of compulsive use. The resemblance may reflect the involvement of the same neural systems, including those implicated in regulatory self-control and reward in both groups of disorders. Wow. Just came out this last year, 5th edition, and they're talking about possible food addiction. This is real. This is just one of the studies. There's so many different studies. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but I just wanted to show it to you to show that the functional MRIs are lighting up the parts of the brain that we talked about, the hedonic center. Many experts are now defining food addiction in its relationship to something that Yale came up with, the Yale Food Addiction Scale. It's a questionnaire, a very involved questionnaire, that takes subjects and asks them about all kinds of different foods. And like we would expect, the types of foods that are addictive. Do you see that? Here's an actual study, and they compiled all the results, and you can see, what are the foods that cause them problems? Ice cream, chocolate, broccoli, no. Okay. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. So donuts, cake, lettuce, all these things. Chips, no, not lettuce, chips. Do you see what I'm saying? Pizza, soda pop. These are the ones that cause problems. You kind of summarize it and you say, hey, the most addictive foods that score the highest on the Yale food addiction scale, pizza, chocolate, chips, cookies, ice cream, processed food. The ones that score the lowest, natural foods. Did you see the extremely obese caveman running out there to find his meal? I don't think so. Okay. What's the biggest complaint by these people when they take these tests? Their biggest complaint, unsuccessful attempts to quit. All right, here's the definition of addiction. An inability to suppress a behavior despite the negative consequences. Compulsiveness. Unsuccessful attempts to quit. Sounds like compulsiveness to me. Now, let's go back to drugs for a second so we can make some comparisons. You show someone who is addicted to cocaine a picture on the top of somebody engaged in taking in cocaine into their body, or methamphetamine, or alcohol, or heroin. You show them pictures, and the hedonic system lights up. Boom! PET scans. These are PET scans on the right. But then you give them, they're addicted to it. You give them the cocaine. You let them go ahead and snort the cocaine. Go ahead and take it. And that same area of the brain, suppressed. Suppressed. It doesn't light up. Not as much as them. So the anticipatory reward is much greater than the consumatory reward. And this is true for all of these drugs. So then you look and you say, okay, here's the normal brain, that's normal. Here's cocaine, here's alcoholic, oh, here's an obese person. Oh my goodness, is it the same? When they eat the food, when they see the food, does everything light up? Hedonic, right? But when they go to eat the food, what happens? It's suppressed. And they don't feel that same reward when they eat the food. It's disappointing. They don't feel the same reward. So, tolerance develops. Tolerance, like the kind of tolerance you get when you're addicted to drugs? Yes. A drive to consume larger and larger amounts of a particular foods to get the same hit on the hedonic center. I'm not getting the same hit when I consume it. I need to consume more. Okay. Genetic factors. Some overeaters will start out their life with a weak or blunted circuitry. We've got to take that into consideration. Some overeaters, they start their life just like some people that become addicted. And see, the mistake that you make sometimes in the back of your mind is that you might say, oh, come on, addiction to food, that doesn't affect me at all. All right. Are you addicted to drugs either? Does it affect everyone? Or does it affect only certain people? Just like drugs only affect certain people. Does that make sense? It's not going to affect everyone. And if you're already genetically predisposed to obesity, are you going to be more predisposed to possible food addiction? The answer, we think, is yes. Obvious, all of this, more studies need to be done. But it's interesting. And what are you addicted to? Broccoli? No. Palatable food. You don't see somebody running around, man, I've got to have an apple. I just, I got to have, I buy 10 apples, I need an apple. Right? You don't see that, right? You just don't see that. All right. The environment we live in has lots of palatable food. Lots of palatable food. Perfectly designed to foster food addiction, especially if there's a genetic susceptibility already there. Foods that are highly concentrated amounts of sugar and fat and even salt. You get them combined, excessive release of dopamine, excessive problems that occur, altering the dopamine reward system, altering our brains in the same way that you'd see with heroin or cocaine, just to a lesser scale. When these three ingredients are combined, the food industry has plenty of scientists that work for them, and when you study what the scientists say, they call it the bliss point. And they take children, they put them in a little room, and they say, hey man, we got this product, it's got a certain amount of sugar in it. We want these children to test out the sugar. And they put a little bit of sugar, then a little bit more, and a little bit more in the same product all the way through. And then the child tastes, and they go, I like that better. Ooh, this one's even better, more and more sugar. Finally, they get to a point to where you add more sugar and they don't like it. It gets worse. So they're like, oh shoot, there is a max that you can hit. And then what do? They design their product with the max in it. Why? Are they trying to target hunger? No. They're trying to target reward so that the child goes to the supermarket and bugs the heck out of their parents for a half hour to get that thing off the shelf so that they'll buy it. Do you get it? All right. So, the effect. They actually talk about, these food companies talk about the stomach share. I want to get more of the stomach share. All right. What makes a food addictive? Refined edible food. They're not even really food. They're like food-like substances because they've refined them so much, they've changed them so much, added so much sugar and fat to them. Okay? Food science, industrial processing, add sugar, other sweeteners, and you change them. Potent, high concentrations of additives like sugar, blast of dopamine in your brain. Pleasure center goes crazy, controls all the other centers. Animal studies show that sweet foods have a higher reinforcing value than even cocaine. And this is in animals, in mice that are addicted to cocaine, but because you eat food more often than you take the cocaine, it's more addicting. You need it more often. Added fats help the flavors merge and meld. Do you know this? You put chocolate in your mouth and it's not just the sugar, it's the fat. The fat makes it go, melts in your mouth. All right? You're in another world for a brief period of time. All right? You add the ingredients, combine the ingredients, enhance their addictive forces, and this is what happens to your brain. You're supposed to, in a normal brain, have a lot of top-down control. Remember the part that was behind your forehead here? That area, the inferior prefrontal cortex and the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex, all these areas, they're supposed to control the others. Keep the hedonic brain in control. No, I know there's a bunch of candy there on the side there, but I'm going to walk right by it. I'm not going to deal with it. Okay? Not today. That's this top-down control right here in red. What happens when you're addicted? Everything else takes over. And now the top-down control is just not there. Okay? So we look at sugar. Let's just take sugar as an example. Receptors for sugar, we think of them in your mouth, right? Your tongue. There's a whole new area of physiology that's opened up just recently called gastrointestinal chemosensation, where they're studying sugar receptors for sugar in your gut, in your pancreas, in your esophagus, in other places. What are they doing when we know they're dealing with appetite? All right? Hardwired for sugar. Do you know that infants, right as soon as they're born, love sugar immediately? Do you know that it takes about 4 to 5 months for a little baby to like the taste of salt? They immediately don't like it. It takes training where the parents go, I like salt, so you're going to like salt. Does that make sense? And so the baby ends up liking salt. But they like sugar right away. Why? Because the hedonic center is already keyed up for that. Why? Because sugar is survival, isn't it? Sugar is, hey, I cry, I get food, I get some sustenance. All right. Sugar in its natural form is nutritious. Refine it, concentrate it, consume it in large amounts, it becomes a problem. Okay? Our bodies are less aware of excessive intake of sugar when it's liquid. So high fructose corn syrup, is that even more of a problem? More of a problem. All right. Yoplait yogurt, twice as much sugar per serving as Lucky Charms. Half a cup of Prego traditional spaghetti sauce, as much sugar as 3 Oreos. Sugar makes food tasty, enhances preservation, confers attributes like viscosity, texture, body, browning capacity. To a cook or a chef or even somebody who's trying to market processed food, is this gold? This is gold. They love this stuff. Added sugar is the problem. Look at all the added sugars. Remember, fighting each other for stomach share, right? The U.S. food labeling system has bought into this. Lobbied, they get lobbied. They get lobbied by all these different companies, so they refuse to come out, even though a lot of different organizations have asked them, separate the sugars. Tell me what's naturally in that product and then what's added. Because the natural sugars, like the natural sugar that's in an apple, that's totally healthy. That's fine. It's the added sugar that's the problem. And they'll never do that. The U.S. food, well, maybe someday, but right now the U.S. food labeling system says, I'm just going to lump them all together. So you have no idea what's natural and what's added. American Heart Association says no more than 50% of your discretionary calorie allowance should come from added sugars. If you have a 1,200 calorie diet, 16 grams, 4 teaspoons of added sugar. Because it's 4 grams per teaspoon. 5 teaspoons of added sugar for an 1,800 calorie diet. 24 teaspoons of added sugar, 12 teaspoons of added sugar for a 2,400 calorie diet. Now look at this. American Heart Association on the average says women, you should be consuming no more than about 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Men, about 9. But just take a Coke. Just take something like a soda. A 12-ounce can of soda has at least 8 teaspoons of added sugar. Minimum. Middle school students, in one study that I was reading, over 2 academic school years, the risk of becoming obese increased by 60% for every additional serving of sugar-sweetened beverage consumed per day. And that's not just soda. That's juice. Average person in the United States, 22 teaspoons of added sugar per day. Wow. We know that sugar affects your health. I don't even need to teach this to you. Everybody knows that. Causing cardiovascular disease, causing diabetes, causing all kinds of different problems. And it's the high glycemic load. It's the added sugar that's the problem. It's these sugars that come in by processing that's the problem. So they did this study, very interesting study, just done recently, 2013. Researchers gave overweight or obese men test meals of milkshakes, either low or high in this added sugar. After consuming them, they measured their blood glucose levels, their hunger level, how hungry are you, how much craving do you have, and functional MRIs to observe which part of the brain was reacting, okay? Over a 4-hour period of time. The high glycemic load shakes, the one that had all that added sugar in them, decreased blood sugar immediately. That's bad for diabetes because that means you're secreting a bunch of insulin to store that sugar, and when you go on those insulin roller coasters, that's going to cause you to get diabetes. Also, made the subjects hungrier. They craved another shake right after they just had one compared to the other group. Why? Because it was hitting the nucleus accumbens, the hot spot, and saying, I like that pleasure, I like that reward, I want more. Had nothing to do with hunger. Now, that's the brain. I got this cartoon just to make a transition here, but the gut's talking to the brain and says, look, I know this sounds crazy, baby, but I feel like we have real connection here. And the brain says, they always say, trust your gut's feelings. Is there such a thing as gut feelings? In other words, can what's going on in your gut affect your brain? All right. We're not alone. In a human gut, there are average 150 to 200 common species of bacteria in there, with over 1,000 less frequent species occupying that area. 2 million bacterial genes occupy the genetic pool of bacteria that live in humans. Compare that to the 23,000 human genes in your body, and you could seriously look in the mirror and say, am I human or bacteria? Right? Because there's a lot more bacteria than there are human. About 100 times more. And of the genes, about 6 pounds of bacteria just in your gut alone. Why are they there? We need to talk about that. So how do you get them in the first place? Well, a baby that's born is going to get that initial population of bacteria from exiting through the vaginal area of their mother, and the vaginal area has certain bacteria, and they pick up those bacteria. Mouth, skin, everywhere, and those bacteria work their way inside their body. As they feed on different foods, the mother's milk and then other foods, they pick up more bacteria. As they engage in their environment and people touch them and stuff like that, they pick up more bacteria. This is how you get your bacteria initially as a baby. They take mice and they purposely, they're called not-biotic mice. They're germ-free. They take mice and they purposely raise them by cesarean section first so that they get no bacteria. They pull them right out of the mother mouse, and then they keep them in a double-sealed system. So two different doors, and they autoclave everything before they feed it to them, food, anything, so that these mice are called germ-free mice. They have no bacteria on their body, no bacteria in their gut, none anywhere. You get them, your initial exposure. By the time you're 2.5 years old to an adult, Bacteroides and Firmicutes are the 2 dominant phyla of bacteria. Keep those names in mind for a second because they're going to play a role in this topic that we're talking about, obesity. All right. So you have this rainforest inside your body with a lot of bacteria that outnumber your cells by 10 to 1. What are they doing there? They're acquired at birth. They can change throughout your lifetime. We didn't think that was true in the past. They definitely can change throughout your lifetime. We thought, hey, you have a certain amount, you get them from your parents, it's kind of family, and you do, you have certain species, but they can change. Now, your host body has an immune system. For those of you in physiology, we're going to be talking about this next week. So the immune system has toll-like receptors. Toll-like receptors in the innate immune system responds to these bacteria and will learn, because your immune system develops at the same time the bacteria are growing. So what happens is bacteria are growing on your body, in your body, and then your immune system develops. So your immune system looks at the bacteria that are there, the good ones, and doesn't react to them. And so they gain what's called a mutualistic relationship, where the bacteria benefit because the bacteria get all of the carbohydrates that you can't digest. We call it roughage fiber. And they feed on that. So they eat all the fiber that's in your diet. Then they turn around and they supply you with B vitamins and short-chain fatty acids that supplies 10% of your body energy, and they help to develop your whole immune system in the beginning, and they keep it going. So without them, the immune, like in autobiotic mice that don't have those bacteria, their immune system is screwed up, messed up, doesn't work properly. Okay? And other systems in their body don't work properly. Is this commensal? Is this where the bacteria benefit and we don't benefit at all? Or are we both benefiting? We're benefiting by having these bacteria there. There's even studies right now. Check this out. I just read this yesterday. I just got this off of the internet yesterday. Very interesting. It says, over the past 2 years, the U.S. National Institute of Mental Health in Bethesda, Maryland, has funded 7 pilot studies with up to $1 million each to examine what it calls the microbiome gut-brain axis. And what they're looking at is, hey, are these bacteria affecting the way you think, affecting depression, affecting anxiety, and we think they are. So the bacteria in your gut are transmitting up here to your brain and affecting also the hedonic center, which is where I want to go. So I look, host has complex mucus, epithelial barrier to block the bad bacteria from getting into your body. And your immune system will attack the bad ones with the toll-like receptors and other ways. A lean person, you look at a lean person, they have a rainforest in their gut, lots of species, lots of different species. And the dominant phyla, Bacteroidetes. Whoops, back here, sorry. An obese person, nutrient overloaded pond. A lot of bacteria, but they belong to only a few species. And the dominant phyla, Firmicutes. Is it different? It's different. Is that meaningful? Does that mean anything? Is there something there? Let's look at it. Take germ-free mice, right? You guys know what germ-free is now, right? Let's look at them. We populate their guts because they have no bacteria in their guts. So we can create our own environment in their guts and make it like a human. We can make them have a gut like a human gut. So we populate their gut with the intestinal microbes from obese women and their lean twin sisters. The mice are fed the same diets, one group obese, the obese bacteria, and the other one, the lean bacteria. Equal amounts of food, everything, and the mice with the obese twin bacteria grow heavier, more body fat than the mice that have the microbes from the thin twin. Heavier mice, less diverse communities of microbes in them, and Firmicutes is the most dominant phyla. Oh, just like an obese person. After beginning the experiment, just like the first one, they do a second experiment. They put both these groups, the one that got the obese bacteria, the one that got the lean bacteria, into the same cage. And oh, the ones that are supposed to get obese, they don't get obese. Oh, wow, they're in the same cage. How'd that happen? Check this out. The mice from the obese group picked up the bacteria from the other mice because mice consume each other's feces. So by consuming each other's feces, did they pick up the bacteria? And they didn't get fat. I know, gross, sorry. But to a biologist, this is really interesting, you know what I'm saying? This is great stuff. So anyways, all right. So now, highly processed food has been linked definitely to diverse gut communities. So you look and you say, okay, feed the mice a Western diet now. Feed these mice a high-fat, high sugar diet. And the mice with the obese type microbes inside of them, they grow fat even when you put them in the same cage with the lean ones. Even though they're consuming each other's feces, it has no effect because for some reason, and we don't know exactly what the reason is yet, but the actual unhealthy diet is preventing the virtuous bacteria from being transmitted to the other mice. formula-fed human infants and infants delivered by C-section have a higher risk of obesity and diabetes than breastfed and vaginally delivered babies. Why? We think they're picking up a different population, different species, group of bacteria. And this study was done at New York University, Maria Gloria Dominguez Bello. Now, young mice have low doses of antibiotics. You give them that over their whole life, and they develop about 15% more body fat than mice not given antibiotics. Why? Because they don't have any bacteria in their gut. It kills everything. Combine a high-fat diet with the antibiotics, and every time those mice get obese. Every time. Antibiotic use and obesity rates are the highest in the southern part of the United States. That's not a scientific study. It's just an observation. All right. Current trials are going on right now in Puerto Rico. They're not very clean and perfect, but this same researcher, Maria Gloria Dominguez Bello, is doing studies in Puerto Rico where they take babies that are born by C-section, and immediately they take a swab, put it into the mother's vagina, pick up that fluid, and they swab their mouth and their skin of the baby so they can pick up the right bacteria. And then they're going to track them for the rest of their life and see, hey, are they going to get obese? Are they going to have problems with depression or other things that are related to the brain? Very interesting study. Here in the United States, we're not as crude as that. So Robert Karp at the National Institutes of Health is saying, hey, we're in a right now, with lots of research, all this money going into it, looking to identify all the lean strains of bacteria by using non-abiotic mice, just put them in one at a time, and determine their roles, develop treatments accordingly, enrich their foods with beneficial bacteria. That's the goal in the future, that we can maybe take bacteria that are beneficial, that are lean, and make like probiotics out of them and give them to an obese person, and it helps them to cultivate the right bacteria in their body and lose that weight. Now, we're not there. This is just the ideas. Remember, are we on the frontier right now? The wild, wild west, right? So this is just interesting stuff, isn't it? You kind of look at it and say, more studies need to be done, and they are being done. Remember, 7 different studies, $1 million each, right? Just to study what it does on the brain. Is it affecting your thoughts? Is it affecting your emotions? So we look and we say, wow, these bacteria are amazing. They're not only providing us with short-chain fatty acids, there's the bacteria, but they can produce products that travel backwards towards the brain in the vagus nerve and the spinal pathways. They can affect your immune system so that they affect what's called the HPA axis, and that's the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal gland. That's where you produce cortisol, and cortisol is the major problem, excess production in stress. Stress. So can having the right bacteria in your gut reduce stress? Maybe. More studies need to be done. And these bacteria produce all kinds of precursors that allow your gut to make all of these different neurotransmitters. Gamma-aminobutyric acid, the number 1 inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. Norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin. Are these bacteria not just living in us and benefiting by our fiber, are they giving us stuff? And this is a huge wave. Here, just this one article that I just got yesterday. The title of the article says, "The Tantalizing Links Between Gut Microbes and the Brain." I had already put the talk together, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. All right, now, so mice resistant to diet-induced obesity, you can genetically alter them and make them resistant to diet-induced, so they're not going to get fat. But you go ahead and feed them the high-fat diet anyways, and you still get the changes in the bacteria. They're not going to get fat, but you still get the changes in the bacteria. You get the Bacteroidetes decreased, the Firmicutes increased, whether there's obesity or not. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at it. This is interesting. Adult human fecal microbial communities from lean donors are given to germ-free mice. You create a humanized mouse where they have the gut bacteria of a human. You with me? And they're from a lean individual. Then these mice, you establish a heritable humanized population. So they can pass, what will happen is as they breed, and they can pass on that humanized population to their offspring. It keeps passing on. So it's set. They're humanized mice. They've got a humanized gut. Then you do this. You change their diet from a low-fat plant polysaccharide diet to a high-fat, high-sugar diet, and the gut microbiota shift in 1 day. 1 day. Wow. I get chills just thinking about it. Okay, anyways, now, feed them a Western diet. You feed them a Western diet and increased adiposity every single time. And get this, here's the most important part. Not that they get fat, but if you remove the bacteria from their gut after they get fat and give them to another mouse that's lean, that mouse will get fat. It's transferable. Just by transferring the bacteria in their gut. Now, how can we put this together? So I'm doing this study. I just got this study and I'm reading it and everything. And then I'm reading the kind of online newspaper. I don't get a newspaper because I don't want to kill all the trees. But anyway, so I'm reading kind of online newspaper, looking at, and I look and I say, oh, wow, there's this report that came out of Rhode Island, from Newport Hospital in Rhode Island. It's just a report. It's not a scientific study, but they've come out with this report. And the report says a 32-year-old female woman, she had recurrent Clostridium difficile infection. So this is a really nasty bacteria. This is a bacteria that's found oftentimes in hospital settings, in clinical settings, and it resists all attempt to kill it with antibiotics. And so it stays in your body, stays, and you can't get rid of it. You're trying all kinds of different ways to get rid of it, can't get rid of it. So as a last resort, they take actual fecal matter from a healthy person, they pull it out of their colon and inject it into that person, and the good bacteria that are in the healthy person outcompetes this Clostridium difficile, and it cures them. And it's called fecal microbial transplantation because that sounds better. Her weight before the fecal microbial transplantation was stable at 136 pounds. She had weighed 136 pounds for years. A BMI of 26, not the perfect, but it's below the 27 to 30 and beyond range, right? So she's still okay. They gave her a choice. They said, you know what, we're giving you feces, would you like it? Would you like to choose your donor? So she says, yes, I'd like to choose my daughter. It's because I don't want some strangers, never mind. So she chooses her daughter. Her daughter's 16 years old, weighs at the time of transplant 140 pounds with only a BMI of 26.4, but within about 4 months, it went all the way up to 170 pounds. So her daughter gained weight like right after she had given her this transplant. So here's what they did. 600 cc's of suspension donor stool into the mother, boom, cures the CDI. So the infection's away. So yes, we cured it. 16 months later, the mother reports unintentional weight gain of 34 pounds, now weighs 170 pounds and is not trying to gain that weight. Doesn't want to gain the weight. BMI of 33 now, over 30, obese. 36 months post-FMT, 177 pounds. She's now 34.5. Animal models show that the obese bacteria can be transferred. I just showed you that, didn't I? Could it happen in a human? We think so. So the new policy at this hospital, Newport Hospital in Rhode Island, is to use only non-obese donors for fecal microbial transplantation, because the chances of making that person obese are high enough so they don't want to take any chances. Wow. That's what I said. That's what I said. No. So how can we put it all together? Why did the daughter gain weight? I don't know. That wasn't in the report. Good question. Good question. All right, now, let's kind of put it together, what we've just been talking about. High fat, high sugar diets, overnutrition, sedentary lifestyle, antibiotic abuse. What's going to happen to your gut bacteria? Are the friendly ones going to be there, the beneficial ones, or are you going to start changing to the opportunistic bad ones? And when you change to those bad ones, it leaves your gut more permeable, so now the toxins from the bad bacteria can enter through the lining in your gut, which they shouldn't be able to. It starts introducing toxic chemicals and things in your system, giving you chronic low-grade inflammation, increased insulin resistance, so diabetes as a result, increased adiposity, so you get overweight, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, whether it's alcoholic or non. These are all results of having the wrong bacteria in your gut. At least that's where we think so far. More studies need to be done. So having the right beneficial commensal bacteria there is critical, okay, in the gut. Now, this is what we've got though. The brain's saying, I'll have a garden salad, please. But if you've got the wrong bacteria, the gut's saying, I'll have a cheeseburger and fries. Does that make sense? And does the gut communicate with the brain? We think so. So can it affect the brain and cause you to grab the cheeseburger and fries instead? Okay. Maybe. More studies need to be done. So I want to kind of get close to the end here with something that's kind of interesting. Here you got the, obviously this person's overweight. They're drinking a soda, bad combination, right? High fructose corn syrup. Keep sucking on that, it'll kill you. Talking to the guy smoking, right? The guy smoking says, what are you sucking on, buddy? Now, is there a connection there? Oh, of course there is. I'm not going to put it in here. There's some kind of connection. You guys know about R.J. Reynolds? Okay. R.J. Reynolds owns Newport, Camel, Palm. They're a big tobacco company, aren't they? I bet you didn't know this. They own Nabisco. Oreos, Chips Ahoy, Belvita, Ritz crackers. This is just some of it. Okay. Now, here's another one. This will blow your mind. Philip Morris, huge tobacco company, right? You know I was going to bring tobacco back into it, right? Huge tobacco company. Marlboro, Virginia Slims, Benson & Hedges, right? Big seller of tobacco. They own General Foods and Kraft Foods. I couldn't fit all the different products that they make. I just put as many as I could fit there. The same marketing strategies used to aggressively market cigarettes in spite of the tobacco problems that they cause, the same aggressive marketing techniques are now being used to sell you and your children processed food. And we wonder why we have an obese problem. It's the children they want. Do you know why? Look at the brain. Which area is still under construction all the way until you're about 20 years old, 25? And if you have an 18 or a 19-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All right? So that's the idea. Now, that's under construction. So here, I've got to tell you something because this is very important. Very important. For you students, you want to be a future parent someday, maybe. This is a really important message, okay? From a biologist, okay? From a physiologist, from solid studies. You need to train your children from the beginning because their hedonic system is already there. Their hedonic system is already telling them, I want that. And if you start feeding them from the very beginning all the processed food with the high sugar and the high fat, their brain has no chance. Their hedonic system grows out of control, controls all the rest of their brain, and you never develop their cognitive area enough. By the time they're an adult, they have a real trouble, in many cases, fighting against certain foods, the foods that they got, especially when they were young. So I'm talking to a student the other day, and she said, oh, that makes sense, Mr. Beeman. I was talking about something related to this. And she said, I have a little baby and just getting out off of breastfeeding and onto the foods, And my pediatrician told me, start them on the fruits and the vegetables first. Don't let them have those really sugary stuff. Because they'll get a taste for that sugary stuff and they will refuse to eat the good stuff. That's because you're training their brain. You're training their brain. And that training has to occur throughout their whole younger life, all the way until they're about 20 to 25 years old. So you're constantly showing their cognitive area how to control their pleasure reward circuits. No, you don't really need that. We'll save that for special occasions. This is what we really need. And here's why. And you work with them their whole life that way. And by doing that, guess what you do? You make this part of the brain gigantic. It controls everything else so well. And that spills over into their whole life. That spills over into their executive function. When they're out there in the population of people around them and they need to work within society and be a productive individual, they're a much more productive individual now because they control all their passions and they control all these things that get out of control in their body. And they've got it under control. They still have fun. They let their passions, they pull the reins off of them every once in a while, let them go. That's awesome. But they know how to control them. They've developed that part of their brain. And their salience is very good. Their ability to order things in the proper order in their life is very good. Not just food, everything else. They must be trained by their parents to train this part right here. And that's one of the big problems we have with children these days. They're given anything they want, every time they want it, ad nauseum. And you're ruining their brain. You are. As an adult, they have no coping skills anymore. They're like, they can't deal with anything. And their hedonic system makes them fly out of control in every situation. In every situation, they fly out of control. So Why do they make a healthy plate with lots of fruits and vegetables? Because the fiber is the cultivating material needed to cultivate the proper bacteria. So you have to look at both areas. You have to say, I'm going to train the child so that they have a nice, strong control, and then I'm going to feed their gut the right foods so that the bacteria don't go up there and cause problems also. And that way, I get the right cultivation for the best bacteria, and the result is amazing. And you end up with the end of my talk, a quote from Hippocrates.